They found the name in margins where ink goes to hide. 17 times in ledgers from the Tidewater, Petersburg, Suffolk, courthouse basements that smelled of damp glue and old dust. Someone had written it small as a thorn, Solomon Crowe. Never the same hand twice. Never in the neat columns where births and inventories sat like arithmetic, always in the fringe, as if whoever kept the books did not want the page to admit what it knew. Next to the name lived numbers. 94 recoveries, fees paid, distances ridden, dogs used, days taken. A success rate that made the professional patrollers look like men guessing at weather. The oddest entries weren't the tallies, but the hesitations around them. Clerks complaining of irregular bounties, questions opened and then sealed. A line scrawled crosswise in 1846 noting a hunter seen weeping as he hauled a family back in chains. The ledgers did not say he was enslaved himself. Paper rarely has the courage of the people it records. In 1839, the Tidewater had the color of something overripe. Tobacco had eaten the soil down to nerves. Columns still gleamed from the road while beams rotted behind plaster. Old names wore new debts. The great dismal swamp lay south and east, a blackwater country that took in those who ran and kept them, if they were clever, if they understood that a path could be a lie. Towns along the edges, Petersburg, Suffolk, were way stations in a game that had rules for the powerful and consequences for everyone else. At Fairmont, 12 miles south of Petersburg, the master kept his cruelty dry and ledgered. Richard Fairmont believed in schedules, barrels, interest due. He called escape theft and hired men to correct the balance. 19 had vanished in 14 months. His columns did not forgive. At an auction in Richmond, one of those orderly afternoons where a man could buy his solution by the pound, Fairmont found the line item that interested him. Solomon, about 30. Exceptional tracking ability. Specialized recovery, literate, cooperative. On the block stood a tall man with calloused hands and a stillness so complete it felt practiced. When questioned, he spoke in a precise middle voice that neither begged nor struck back. Yes, he could read. Yes, he knew swamp roots. Yes, he had served as a retriever before his former owner's collapse. Fairmont paid $1,200 3 times a field hand, and took home not a solution but a blade with 2 edges. He housed Solomon apart, fed him better, placed a rifle, a horse, and a bloodhound named Judge at his disposal. He also placed a bargain in his mouth like a bit. Bring them back, and your wife and 2 children, held on a neighboring place as collateral, will be purchased and reunited here. Fail and they go downriver to Sugar, where life was measured in short, burning years. Fairmont never learned what the bill of sale didn't care to know, that Solomon had been born free in Delaware to a carpenter who could make a table sing, that at 12 he had been stolen on a Maryland road and his papers burned, and that he had survived by learning the preferences of men who liked to call themselves owners. A previous master had made the choice plain. Use your intelligence for me or watch me sell your family piece by piece. He chose what any father would choose and hated himself in the choosing. In time he became the thing he despised, and then, with a ferocity that looked like quiet, he began learning how to be 2 things at once. The quarters received him with the particular silence reserved for tragedies that wear a human face. Here was a man who hunted his own. No one knew about the collateral beating 2 counties away in the shape of Mercy, 9 and Isaac 7. No one knew about Hannah, who had asked her husband 2 years earlier how a person continues after dropping his soul somewhere he cannot return to. Celia, house servant, clear-eyed, connected like a root net, ran a careful network for escapes. Abel the blacksmith cached tools in an abandoned cabin. 11 had reached safety in a year. 8 more were scheduled to leave together when the moon cooperated. Solomon's arrival placed a hunter in the middle of the map. 3 weeks after he came, a field hand named Marcus folded in the row and was hauled to the sick house. At dusk he disappeared. By dawn the absence had hardened into alarm. Solomon accepted Fairmont's orders, saddled his horse, clipped Judge to the lead, and rode out under a milk-thin sun. The young man's trail was careful at first, stream bed, thicket, the old tricks, but fear makes rhythm sloppy. A brush broken shoulder height, a heel in mud at a crossing, leaf litter scuffed where someone rested too long. Judge's nose kept the line like a needle on a groove. The swamp's breath met them by noon, cedar and rot, tannin-stained channels, the drip of water like a metronome. At the border of that dark, Solomon did something no one saw. He tied the dog to a cypress knee, sat on a fallen trunk, and opened a forbidden book the size of a hand. In careful script he wrote, Marcus Pembry Tobacco, headed interior, strong runner, deserved better. 93 names stood behind the new one like gravestones. He closed the journal, waited 15 minutes while the swamp spoke in its many small languages, then rose and kept moving. His choice did not change. The rate at which it killed him did. He found Marcus near sundown on a scrap of dry ground ringed with black water. The young man didn't run. There was nowhere to go that wasn't drowning. Just tell them you lost me, he said. Solomon dismounted, the dog low growling. They have my children, he answered. Not as excuse, but as inventory. Something like recognition passed over Marcus's face. He asked their names, Mercy and Isaac. He asked if chains today would buy them tomorrow. Solomon said the math was a machine built to injure, and that survival was the art of deciding which part of yourself you could afford to lose. Marcus extended his wrists. Do what you have to. Just know what we will call you. Solomon bound the hands tight but not cruel, and that night a torchlit yard swallowed another man. From a window Celia watched the handover and understood the clock had moved. The network would have to go early or not at all. What none of them knew was that along Marcus's route Solomon had left a whispering countermap. 3 stone cairns, a cloth strip low on a branch, a diagonal slash on bark. They pointed not to maroon islands already watched, but towards safer, stranger lines he had learned to read. It was rebellion in a boy's pocket size. It would not save the man he brought back. It might save the next one. A pattern settled over the estate. When the horn sounded and someone did not answer, Solomon saddled, Judge bayed, and the two vanished toward disturbance. Usually they returned with a body still breathing. Not always. Some losses were theatrical, meant for Fairmont's ledger. In September, 2 brothers and an old herb woman vanished in storm and moonless dark. 6 days later, Solomon returned with one brother limping, said the others had drowned. The truth had more edges. He found all 3 in a trapper's shack, drew a route in dirt, taught them patrol rhythms, looked at the sprained ankle, and made a butcher's calculus. The strong left. The wounded came back. Aunt Ruth called him a man killing himself slowly, and he said yes. Sometimes he lost a trail on purpose. Samuel from the stables disappeared into the interior and never reappeared in bondage. 2 kitchen women found a line east that led to hands that hid, not hands that struck. Yet for every secret success there were 3 returns. He kept his own terrible book. 94 captured, 23 helped. 11 found too late to help at all, and the numbers lay on his chest at night like bricks. When Fairmont finally purchased Hannah and brought her to the place, alone and meant as leverage, the nights changed shape. In their narrow cabin, the distance between them weighed more than chains. How many? She asked in the dark. He said the number and the smaller number and admitted he counted as a way to pretend at balance. She told him Mercy was forgetting his face, that Isaac didn't remember it to begin with, and asked if they were saving their children or training them to believe survival meant wearing the shape of the master's hand. He had no answer language could hold. Celia watched, weighed, and made the most dangerous offer of her life. She came to him on a path north of the fields with the morning mist still sitting in the hollows, and said without introduction, "Decide who you are." She laid the plan in his hands, 35 people on April 15th, 3 routes that became 1, caches, timings, dark moon, and a side plan sharper than any knife. 2 days prior, a merchant's wagon with a false bottom bound for Pennsylvania, room for 3. Hannah, Mercy, Isaac. The kitchen garden woman on the neighboring place would open the first door. The network would open the rest. In return, Solomon would lead the search off like a will-o'-the-wisp and, if necessary, arrest the right decoy to sell the wrong story. He listened, asked trackers questions, changed what needed changing, and somewhere inside the arithmetic cracked and let light in. On the 13th, he held his children in a yard that still smelled of night. Mercy taller, grave, Isaac clinging to Hannah's skirt. Both wary of the stranger a mother said was father. He promised he would come. Whether the sentence was truth or medicine was a matter for another god. The wagon rolled away, wheels whispering on road dust. He watched until it was a shadow, then less than that, and turned back to the labor of betrayal done the right way. The alarm came too early. An overseer, eager to count bodies into a day, noticed the quiet that wasn't peace and raised chaos before midnight had finished being dark. Fairmont howled like a man who hears coins falling down a well. Within an hour the party rode. Solomon, judge, 4 professionals, overseers, a second string of dogs. The trail pointed northeast as planned, then split as planned, and Solomon made his first public mistake. He read west with authority. The party followed. For 2 days he led them into terrain that tired men and made dogs uncertain, lost and found the line in ways that consumed light, pointed out old hearth ash and called it new. On the 3rd morning a rider reached them with opposite truth. 3 fugitives taken near Suffolk. Under whip they swore the others went west, which meant they were telling the lie he had scripted while their capture place told the truth he needed hidden. Suspicion drew itself on Hutchkins' face like a bruise. They swung northeast. Now there were too many eyes and not enough ways to misread. He still stole hours where he could, still suggested a hard crossing instead of an easy one, still stopped to doubt when certainty would have been faster, but Hutchkins rode close and counted his breaths. At a campsite on day 5, the sign said 6 hours separated hunter and hunted. It wasn't enough. Solomon lay awake hearing distances shrink and knew mathematics did not negotiate. Before dawn, the pistol woke him. Hutchkins stood above him with the others ghosting the edges. The man's voice went almost gentle as he revealed what his rider had discovered. Patterson's wagon, a clever floor, 2 children inside who bore Solomon's face. The words hit like a cold river. Hutchkins gave him a choice that wasn't: hunt as before or watch 32 die to make the arithmetic neat. Solomon, who had spent 2 years making uglier choices than language allows, looked at the men and finally took one that had no compromise in it. No. The hunter smiled like a man who has planned for mercy and found a way to enjoy it. Run north, he said. We'll track you. You'll lead us without meaning to. It was brilliant and ruinous. Instinct would deliver him to the very people he meant to save. Refusing would buy nothing but agony. He ran because a pistol makes philosophers of us all. He led them toward noon into a maze he knew by heart, where water wears a mask of plants and islands aren't, where cypress knees rise like knuckles and mud has a hand. He walked the logic of it without error, leaving a trail as obvious as panic. Then he took a fallen trunk bridging black water and turned to face them. Hutchkins stepped onto the log with a caution he tried to hide. You want the roots? Solomon called. There are more than you think. Some went west, some north through interior, some toward the coast to take ships. You will not catch them all. Hutchkins advanced, promising persuasion. Solomon pointed to the water below, to the green that looked solid and wasn't, to the distance in every direction that could not be walked. There is one safe path in and one out, he said. I marked yours. You can reverse it before dark if you don't pretend to be clever. A dog tested the wrong patch and went into its shoulders. A hunter dragged it free, swearing softly. For a minute the swamp spoke louder than men. Show us out and live, Hutchkins said, lowering the pistol to a lie. I'm done being your instrument, Solomon answered. My family is beyond you. The rest is not my bargaining chip. He told them how to survive anyway. Follow your own scars back. Do not deviate. Fear will try to be your guide. Do not make it your map. He did not speak heroically about killing them because he understood the shape of evil. A man with a whip is not the system. He is what the system uses and what it breaks. Night came down like a lid. The hunters, chastened by dark water and the logic of not dying, retreated the way they had come, slow, testing, cursing softly when muck reached for them. Hutchkins paused at the far end of the log and called back that others would follow. Let them, Solomon said. Time is all I needed to buy. He sat on the trunk until the night finished and began again, the swamp waking and sleeping around him. In the thin light, he took out the forbidden book and wrote his last accounting. My family is free. 32 have a chance. I am done hunting. Whatever comes is mine to choose. When the next party entered the maze 3 days later, they found the place and not the man. Some said he went to a maroon island that moved when you tried to find it. Some said the swamp took him the way a mother takes a child into a crowd and loses him on purpose. Fairmont offered $500 and watched his own arithmetic wither anyway. The estate broke apart by 1847, sold in pieces, its ledgers packed into boxes that remembered too much. The journal survived in a pouch oiled against the water, hidden under a 3-stone mark that meant nothing to anyone who hadn't learned his small language. A Union corporal found it during the war and read it the way a man reads after a battle, piece by piece with his thumbs shaking. It drifted to Boston in a trunk and slept again. Of the 32, 28 reached free soil. 4 were sold for money larger than loyalty. The 28 gave their children names that did not appear in margins. Hannah sewed in Philadelphia. Mercy taught other children to read the word freedom and then the rest of the sentence. Isaac grew into a man who learned the routes north and walked them backward with strangers until strangers became neighbors. They told stories in which their father was a traitor who turned and a savior who had been too long delayed. Both were true enough to keep. Judge the bloodhound would not work properly for anyone else. He grew reluctant to follow the human smell that had fed him and retired to the yard where his eyes closed in sun and opened on dreams it is not given to men to judge. The swamp kept its counsel. Clerks who had once written Solomon's name in margins retired and died and left their careful notations in drawers where later, hands opened them and felt that prickle you feel when the paper in your fingers refuses to be only paper. What do you call a man who became a blade to save his children and then turned its edge the other way at the cost of himself? Monster, a father, betrayer, a redeemer? The ledgers have a space for absconded and a date. April 1840, never recovered. The truer ledger lives where numbers cannot balance. It lives in a handful of stones pointing the wrong way on purpose, in a wagon's false bottom, in the silence a man keeps until it is time to say no, in the black water map of a place that does not forget. If you ask the swamp who Solomon Crowe was, it will not answer in words. It will show you the line of a log across dark water and the space at the center where a man once sat very still, and it will let you decide whether he was running away or finally staying where he chose.